Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, as part of our series, New Asian Cinemas, it's a pleasure to present the 2002 Filipino production, Wretched Lives. Now, this is a crime melodrama about the struggles of a young woman trying to protect her sister and trying to climb out of the slums of Manila. It has the familiar shape of that kind of crime story, but it gives us a great deal of detail about life in the 21st century in the Philippines, contrasting, among other things, larger political corruption with the struggles of our protagonist. Here, joining us after today's screening, is Frances Hui, the film curator of Asia Society, who will be chatting about the film in its context and about its multiple implications. Now, enjoy this view of contemporary Filipino cinema in Wretched Lives. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed looking at this powerful film that uses a crime drama to really dig into the social conditions and the political conditions of the Philippines in the 21st century. It's a rich work. It's a work that has been awarded and traveled the circuit of festivals very, very well, and we're proud to have presented it here. Joining us today to talk about this film for the first time on City Cinematheque is Frances Hui. She is the film curator at Asia Society. Many people have read about, I think, whether it be in Time Out or New York Times, they've read the listings of the things that you've been screening and planning for Asia Society. Some of her recent projects include a retrospective of the cinema of Thailand, contemporary cinema of Thailand, as well as marching a little bit further back into the archives of Asian cinema, a very significant retrospective of Japanese cinema of the 1960s. Welcome to City Cinematheque, La.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So let's start off with this, and as a political film, okay? What do you think about this film? There's all kinds of ways to make a political film. I mean, and how do you think this film goes about being a political film?
This film is a very, very difficult film to watch. It's filled with violence. You have physical violence, you have psychological violence, and you have violence on screen and off screen as well. And I think the director has done a very effective job in portraying a story basically about one woman living in this one slum in the Philippines, but at the same time bringing it in a bigger and larger political context, basically mapping out what's going on in the political arena, a political uprising taking place. ESA-2, that's called the Second People Power Revolution.
Right, right. And so what we've got here is not the primary thread of the plot being political, because we're very much allied. I mean, we have in many ways a traditional protagonist. We have someone who is set up with a set of challenges. Her mother dies. We have the issue of her care of her sister. Clearly, she is embattled, challenged by her economic circumstances, and so we're tracked with her. But it's as we take that journey with her that it folds out into the larger context. But we're really anchored with her the entire time.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. As I was watching the film, it reminded me of films such as the Brazilian film City of God.
Ah, very good point.
And Los Olvidados. And those films are all set in slums in their respective cities. And what's really remarkable about these films, including Wretched Lives, is that they all have a way of portraying a very violent and cruel reality, but at the same time, not making the slum dwellers innocent characters. They are not just simply victims of economic disparity. Right. they actually actively participate in violence themselves. And it could be because of many different reasons.
Right.
It is an environment in which they find no protection. So what do? You have to put justice in your own hands. You have Uno going out to find and kill the man who raped Nika.
Right.
And you also have Vanessa. In the end of the film, she has to commit a murder in order to free herself and her sister. So it's a film in which you find no redeeming qualities. It's a very harsh and tough world. What is really interesting is the character of Nika. She might be the only person in the entire film that's innocent.
Right.
And she basically represents the poor people of the Philippines. They are manipulated by forces larger than themselves.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, the poor people are paid money and food to participate in political protests. And Nika is basically paid hamburgers and toys to engage in sex acts with these men in her neighborhood.
Absolutely. So she becomes this kind of symbol, and also in her own way, this kind of parody of that which is happening to all the other people. So she retains her innocence, even though she is abused in that. But hers is at least a moral innocence that no one else can claim. And it's not, as it were, it's not as if anyone wants to do this. One of the things that this film does rather well in its Philippine context, but I love the way you've linked it up with other films such as City of God or Los Olvidados. They're very pertinent, is that they show that this is a consequence of structural conditions.
Absolutely.
And this is not something that an individual has to make choices, but they have to make choices in unfair situations in which there really is no good choice to be made insofar as they can see it. And that, you also hinted towards something I think it's also very interesting, which is this lack of institutional support, or because the institutions of the modern sectors, of the more prosperous sectors of society, are either so involved in protecting themselves or are so corrupt that there can be no or little dependence upon those traditional societal institutions. Now, I must say that this is a neighborhood where actually ambulances do get there, and people, can leave. But there are all these little details that are very interesting, like how well dressed she is, and you're kind of going, well, not everyone in her neighborhood is well dressed as she is. And then, as the film is developing, we see that she works in the developed sector of the city, and she's, a cosmetics salesperson. So she has access to being part of the service culture for this elite, and therefore she can see everything that everyone else has and can aspire in that direction. But ultimately, she becomes the really nicely dressed woman who then has to go back into her neighborhood.
I mean, she dresses really well, works probably in a really nice shopping mall, but at the same time, she has no job security. She's losing her job. I think she's probably hired temporarily, and then she goes to this supervisor to plead for the continuation of the job.
No, that's a very good point that then spills over in terms of the way the film is structured into her notion of who she has to choose as a mate, because because she knows that yes, she gets access to this sector, but no stability. You can be brought into the sector, but you can be thrown out of it just as whimsically, as it were, as that. And that's the same thing with her initial boyfriend.
Oliver.
Oliver. The taxi driver, in which he's in exactly the same position of not being able to connect into anything, into the economy that leads him towards a path of security, which then gets us to Uno.
Yes.
What do you think of Uno?
Well, Uno is an interesting person because an interesting character because there is complexity to this person. He seems like a really evil person because he kills people without any problem, and he works for a man who seems to run some kind of shady business. He's a bodyguard, but at the same time, I mean, he abuses both Vanessa and Nika, but at the same time, he seems to genuinely love this woman. Or initially, and what I find interesting is that when Vanessa, throughout the film,
Right.
or a better part of it, she's an innocent person. She wasn't doing anything bad, but she makes bad choices for her sister.
Good distinction. Very good distinction.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And she makes a bad decision for herself as well, because clearly she's more in love with Oliver.
Right.
But Uno is this guy who can provide her with some kind of material comfort. It's not like he's not a rich guy, but at the same time, in that environment she's from, he's relatively well off. I mean, he came up with the cash for the funeral.
Absolutely. Absolutely the case. And what's interesting is then when we go to the scenes where we're with him and we see what kind of stability it has. And it's a stability that is dependent upon corrupt power structures. Because his job is a good one and he does what he is told to keep his job secure, because his bosses have, they have their schemes that generate a great deal of money, but that are operating illegally or at worst completely illegally, and in another way, at best, in the informal economy. Because that's another one of the things that one sees in this particular tradition of filmmaking that stretches, really, as you said, from Los Olvidados and Buñuel till today, is you see that the modern city is not just about insurance companies and legitimate industry, but particularly the modern city in the developing world. Vast sector of the economy is an informal economy, whether that be something that's nefarious and obviously, say, the drug trade, that, or whether it's just at the level of people selling all kinds of little goods in an unlicensed way.
And how about organ trafficking?
Oh, very good point. Very, very, very good point. And that's a very interesting, you bring up a very interesting point with that, because it's all about what are the options here to get out. And one of the things the film shows is how undesirable so many of those options are, but how they've been normalized.
Yes.
The fact that you can, if I need money, I can always sell my kidney. Okay? And let us hope, to many people watching this, you're saying, that's not really a good idea, but does the world exist in which that is a normalized idea? And in this environment, it's a normalized
I've read reports that people who sell their organs in the Philippines, they're usually paid something between a few $100s to maybe $4,000, and is done illegally, obviously. And none of these people become better off afterwards. They might be able to get the cash to take care of certain immediate problems in their lives, but they go back to where they were.
Well, this is a very interesting point, because there's different forms of entrapment that happen in stories, okay? And sometimes entrapment can be something that's just psychological. Somebody can't break through in another way. But I think this is the kind of film that paints a broader social picture, in which we're looking at a character who's actively striving to find a way out, and it becomes a catalog not only of her bad decisions, but of the bad options available in front of her. And I think your point is an excellent one, that if you're not getting good options, then how do you distinguish between something that's going to have a greater long-term, effect, again, like an education, okay, versus something that is going to simply solve some immediate economic problems, but does not open a door to anything else after that.
It is a life that is without any sense of security. Look at the typhoon sequence. I mean, people live in these conditions, and the houses are constructed by basically scrap metals.
Right.
And they cannot withstand typhoons, which happen quite often in the Philippines.
Right.
And then your houses can be just wiped out, and you're homeless.
That's exactly right. Now let's talk a little bit about. We've been talking about the characters, and we've been talking about the setting. I think there's more to be said about the setting, and I think the typhoon sequence is a very good example on your part of how an incident just comes into the plot that then has effect upon individual characters, but actually has a social effect as well. We see again the further precariousness of their life. But you know, in addition to that, this is a film that has a lot of television in the film. What do you make of that? Why do you think that is here?
I think I like the fact that the filmmaker has used this strategy of inserting mostly television broadcasts,
Right.
but also radio as well, to convey what's going on politically outside of that immediate environment. So everything is actually connected. You see this violence here, but there is something else going on outside. What is ironic is that the radio broadcast in the beginning of the film says that it's a bloodless revolution. But there's so much blood happening.
Yeah, I know it's a good point. So that I think what's a very interesting point is that you're making is that there's two levels of interpretation that can go on here. One level is how the characters in the story world interpret this, because we watch them watching, okay, and what lessons are they capable of taking from it? What can they learn from it? How can they act? Are they incited to go out by this or not? And then there's a way in which the filmmaker is also giving it to us, to have us to think, well, what's the relationship between, you know, Vanessa and her life and these larger incidents? Yeah. And I think in that way, we're being asked to put the story together in a broader way than the film shows that the people themselves can put it together. Right. I mean, at the end, there is the scene, you know, at the end in which they understand that they've been manipulated yet again. But as they say, well, let's go over and do that, but then that is dissipated, you know, in some measure. So we don't have a sense that that revelation will be a lasting revelation, that they will be able to take significant action about. Now, I'm not saying it's utterly cynical. I'm just saying, perhaps I would say it's skeptical as to whether this will lead to the action. Whereas we as spectators are left with a kind of larger picture and the challenge of putting it together.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic political uprising, the ESA-2. It took place in 2001, and the then president of the Philippines, Estrada, was accused of corruption. And there were two military generals that pulled their support away from him, and they were trying to put a Arroyo as the new president. Right. And it was, if you would want to call that peaceful, he actually stepped down on his own will, and then people were congregating at this big avenue, right, which is called EDSA. And a lot of poor people thought that whole political revolution was some kind of conspiracy among political and business elites, the military, and the Catholic Church. And so they wanted to side with Estrada. I think in the film it's conveyed that some people are paid to support him, right, but there are others, they willfully do so. And he ran on a platform, anti-poverty platform. But the problem is that no matter who these people support, in the end, they're kind of forgotten.
Right.
And they're left with nothing.
Well, and this leads to, you know, on the part, appropriately on the part of the people who have been victimized by these other powers, of a kind of cynicism. A number of years ago, I was in Latin America, and I was screening a very good independent film about immigration called Dirt, written and directed by Nancy Savoca, and it's about Salvadoran immigration here and the struggles. It's a very, very good film in many ways. And I had a question from the audience, and the question said, "Why did the United States government sponsor this film?" Well, this is an independent American film. I said, "This is not a government-sponsored film." And he said, "But it shows how hard immigration is." I said, "Well, yes, because that's the filmmaker who's explicitly working in a neo-realist way wants to do it." And he said, "No, this is American propaganda because they don't want us to come."
Oh.
And I had never, you know, imagined that the sympathetic, humanistic film could be interpreted in that way. But I, you know, then I thought it through. I said, well, wait a minute. Who is asking this question? I mean this very sympathetically. And what is his view of how he is dealt with by a superpower like the United States or by powerful elites in his country? And it's always a matter of manipulation from his point of view. So I tried to bring him around to I thought the proper interpretation of the film. That this is not U.S. propaganda against immigration. It's just a portrait of what the experience is really like, accurately so. So I bring that up because in a film like this, you can see all of a sudden, particularly at the end of the film, the sense of revelation. Oh, no, they did it to us again, you know, and somehow. Oh, we should have learned our lesson, but when will we ever learn the lesson? Because these powers are always there.
You know, this kind of cycle just goes on and on. It keeps happening. Estrada, in this film, he's kicked out of office.
Right.
He ran in the presidential election last year. He was second.
Well.
So it's somebody who was accused of corruption. He was kicked out of office, and then he came back, and then he was second in the election.
Well, and you know, see, this is a very interesting point you bring up, because again, for a Filipino audience watching this film, you know, years later, because this film is almost 10 years old, they would, what you've just said, reporting these incidents, would only sort of further emphasizes the point of the film, that there are cycles that are happening here, cycles that are happening at this larger political level, that the same people who hold power always return. It's the kind of the eternal return of that.
And people must understand history. They must learn from the past. You have to revisit. I think it is interesting for people in the Philippines to watch this film again today.
Right, absolutely.
You know, Imelda Marcos, she got a seat in the House of Representatives. Can you believe it?
No. Well, she did.
Recently.
Did she give away shoes to get? I'm sorry.
I don't know. Maybe she did.
Yeah, but also we have these this hint of all these larger cycles that take place at the level of candidates and of parties. But also that's one of the reasons I think we're so sympathetic to Vanessa. We're sympathetic, of course, because she's abused. She has these economic and physical challenges. But also there's this sense that she can't connect with anything but the cycle of her immediate life. That hers is a life of going from one job, getting to dress nicely, to something perhaps more menial, to another opportunity. Maybe she gets to dress nicely again, but never with it. It's always one step forward, two steps back. as we say.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you watching the film, you keep wondering, it's like, how can she not know this environment is really bad for her sister?
Right.
But I mean, she has so many problems she has to deal with. I mean, it's just not on her mind.
Well, that's exactly right, and it also brings up this issue of community, because we do see that there is a neighborly community here. While the individual relationships she has with the males become troubled in one way or another, there is, despite all of this corruption, etc., there is a good sense of, well, these are my people, and so how can I remove my sister to an institution if, generally speaking, I don't trust institutions? No.
I mean, she has her reasons.
Yeah. No, absolutely the case. And I think the film does a very good job of showing us those reasons. That's one of its accomplishments.
I mean, the only problem might be that guy, Mr. Delgado.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a little too nice.
Well, we're gonna
maybe it would be more interesting if he's a little bit ambiguous.
Okay, so we're gonna have to leave our viewers with the ambiguity of Mr. Delgado, something to think about, because we've come to the end of our time. If you'd like more information about this particular series on City Cinematheque, or more generally about City Cinematheque, or even more broadly about City University Television, there's a way to get that information, and it's going to be no surprise. Visit our website. Please visit www.cuny.tv. You'll find click-ons there for City Cinematheque, other programming on City University Television, and you'll find click-ons that will allow you to email us with your commentary, your thoughts, or if you wish to enroll in several of our e-lists so you'll receive information about our programming. So please visit www.cuny.tv. La, thank you for bringing your broad expertise on Asian cinema and Asian society. It's a pleasure chatting with you, and I hope you'll be back on City Cinematheque sometime.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Great, great. And thank you for visiting us today as we took a look at Wretched Lives. Please tune in for more in this series or more from other series on City Cinematheque as we stroll through the archives of film history. In any case, thanks for being with us today. Bye-bye for now.